Though it's cold and lonely in the deep dark night, I can see paradise by the dashboard light. Welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is some car-themed lyrics for you from Meatloaf, who is from Texas.
Was from Texas, correct?
His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson.
I forgot that he's no longer with us. R.I.P. Mr. Loaf.
Drew, the depressing death stuff is supposed to wait till the end of the show.
I'm sorry.
Thank
I've
you
already
very
checked
much.
the book.
already-
The book is good. There's no mention.
Okay. Well, I had to do just balance it out here at the top. I'm Drew Scanlon, bringing everyone down. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
Good. I always struggle. You often do beautiful American lyrics for US, and it's always like sort of like American rockers or people who, like, for some reason I never get them, and I always see Rob like smiling, like a knowing smile, and I'm always like, oh no. It's like I had that like I didn't do the class assignment kind of feeling whenever you do that.
Yeah, and this one also unknown to you.
Yeah, I know Meatloaf.
It's also
but-
kind of a deep cut.
okay.
Like, well, if you're a Meatloaf fan, it's not. But if you know one Meatloaf song, it probably isn't this one.
It's not bad NFL.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also joining us, Rob Zachney, who knows a little bit about Meatloaf. How are you, Rob?
It's true.
Is that a euphemism?
It's it
No,
works
I
on
saw
a
you
few
wisely
different
nodding.
levels, actually. But yeah, no, I've been known to enjoy a guy who smuggled what are basically Broadway show tunes onto rock playlists for years. It's fantastic.
Isn't Meatloaf like? It's just there are certain like eras in pop culture, and I often, whenever I get like a sort of a mid-40s guy, and I'm like, you just don't see these people on the charts anymore. Like Meatloaf did it right there. Like Jimmy Nail in the UK. Like there's just a bunch of these lads who just, that was their moment to do it, and they did it, and now they're out. Now it's all teenage girls.
Well, we can reminisce about the good old days of meat. Friends called him meat.
Mr.
You know that?
Loaf.
If you're new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode. Less Meatloaf talk in that one, but it assumes no prior F1 knowledge, explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that and get up to speed, this year's primer is episode 216. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of the podcast, along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and this month's category, a lot of weird things. So if you'd like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What do we have going on this month, Danny?
Do you think in Mexico they'd call him Senor Loaf? Like if you went to the Mexican Grand Prix? That'd be pretty good. I like that.
Loaf-san.
All these are great names that you could sign up as a title sponsor and force me to read out every week. We are doing the BMW films, as we talked about last week. I'm very excited. I still have not watched them. I'm going to come in pretty hot on these ones. How long are they each, actually, Rob? I know you've already
About
watched
10
them all.
minutes apiece.
And how many are we watching? Like 6 or 7 of them?
All of them.
Okay.
Like 10.
Great.
Oh, boy.
That's tomorrow morning / lunchtime sorted. Excited to do it. So if you're a patron, check out that podcast, and you could also, if you wanted to become one of our title sponsors, only a couple of races left. I'm always interested to see if we get somebody who chucks in right at the end, who comes in for like a championship winning entry, much like Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cycfish Training, Turf SCS, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, TelemetryDuck.com, Quack, FTC, James Andrew Perla Adams, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foote, Abdullah Althani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us Podcast, $, Snigs, Alex Couchet, Max Voltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, Umberto Roca, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Madman, Jason Kelly, and M Squared Racing welcomes Ellie.
All right. Well, thank you all of our patrons out there, all of our listeners.
Terrific.
For listening. And as we mentioned, Danny, before the race, or the podcast got started, we have a lot of nothing to talk about.
We've a lot to talk about because it's like a post-race and a pre-race, and then we also have like a decent amount of news and weird post-race stuff that happened. But the races themselves, Drew.
Yeah. Let's get to it.
Yeah.
Sprint grid. Max Verstappen on top after the sprint shootout. A rare spin in the shootout, going over some bumps, and we'll come back to the bumps. Charles Leclerc second, Lewis Hamilton third, Lando Norris fourth, Oscar Piastri fifth, Carlos Sainz sixth, Sergio Perez seventh, Alex Albon starting the sprint in eighth place, Pierre Gasly ninth, and Daniel Ricciardo starts 10th. He qualified 11th, but George Russell had a penalty for impeding Leclerc during the shootout. Danny Rick back in the saddle, starting 10th in the sprint. Behind him, George Russell, as mentioned. Fernando Alonso, 12th. Esteban Ocon, 13th. Lance Stroll, 14th. A really weird thing happened to him in the braking zone on one of his runs. Looked like the rears locked when it's usually the fronts. The commentators were saying, very strange. They had old Hinch on the comms this week for the United States Grand Prix, even though he's Canadian. Aston Martin had another weekend to forget here, and this is just really the start of it. Zhou Guanyu 15th, Nico Hulkenberg 16th, Kevin Magnussen 17th, Valtteri Bottas is 18th, followed by Yuki Tsunoda and Logan Sargent. Danny, do you want to take us through the start of the sprint?
Yeah, all eyes at the top of the hill to see if Leclerc can get up the inside. That's kind of that's always the desire on this one, is like, is somebody going to be able to, because it's a left-handed turn. Most of the circuits in the air are clockwise. This is counterclockwise. But there's something about the uphill, like, nature of this, which means no one ever seems to, like, have a bad start here. Like, I don't know if it's something to do with that, but the grip is a little bit easier or something. But as it turns out, Verstappen has a very strong start, is able to cover off the inside fairly quickly on Leclerc. It's also like not a turn you can. It's a hairpin basically, so you can't like throw it up the inside. Like you're gonna feel it on the way out of that turn.
I mean, doesn't this kind of happen in the race?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So Hamilton though had a decent start around the outside of, was it Lando who was in fourth? So there was a battle between him and Lando leading up to turn one. But then by the time they got to the outside of that, Hamilton had gotten nose ahead of Leclerc, and then I swear to God, this happens every single year as they're entering the S's, they're fighting, and if you're not like the car in front, it's just like there's no chance you can overtake in that section. But they always I feel like dodge out of the way in the last second. And Leclerc sort of drives alongside Hamilton, but then ultimately has to back out. And Verstappen's already trying to get that DRS gap ahead of them. He's a little bit down. But Hamilton ends up closing the gap on him as well, as Leclerc sort of starts to fall back a little bit.
Yeah, Sainz also is on soft tires here while everyone else is on mediums. So he makes up a place on Piastri straight away, banging into him off the line, and then gets Norris down into turn 12, I think it is. Perez is once again in the middle of the pack trying to pick his way through, and on lap 2 starts attacking Piastri, who puts up a great defense, and Perez does have to wait until the next lap, but eventually he does get by. Unfortunately for Piastri, Russell is there to capitalize on that too. He does get by, albeit by going off track, like his teammate, which earns him a 5-second penalty. Gasly then gets by Piastri on lap 5, who, with that move, drops to 9th. The commentators surmising that he has damage from being hit by Sainz. And then the other McLaren of Norris, lap 10, having a better race, and at this point has caught back up with Sainz, who is on those aging soft tires. Gets by easily with DRS on the back straight. Then Perez gets by Sainz a lap later into 5th. And then on lap 14 of, was it 17, 19. I think it was 19? Yeah. Russell catches up to Sainz, makes a move, but Sainz on those old tires lets him go into turn 1 and then cuts back and retakes the position, which was a great move. And Sainz keeps it until the end.
Swing away.
It's interesting the way that played out with Russell. I actually didn't think I didn't think the pass was that egregious. Like it's a breach of the rules. But in terms of like he got pushed out wide, he went around, and decided to keep the place. I think Mercedes really thought it was going to work out in a way that like the 5-second wrist slap was going to be kind of trivial, and they would make up whatever ground they needed over the course of the running. And boy, did that strategy turned to ash pretty much around the time that Sainz was clearly not going to be overtaken. And the other problem is that it's not like Russell had enough. Pace to like fully leave Gasly behind. The commentators were talking like that question really came under scrutiny because
yes,
Russell could have given the place back.
Yeah,
and done it the right way. A couple laps later, and then he probably keeps that position over Gasly. And they just, for whatever reason, they just didn't do it. And it's kind of an odd one. Like, did they have like enough respect and fear from McLaren that they thought that if they gave that place back, it would be like a multi-lap battle and you'd just be like bottled up behind them?
Or is it this issue that is sort of a I don't know, like a domino of the whole, you usually get 5 seconds for this, which is our teams being tactical about this and saying, you know what, like we can eat it. We think like it's going to be worthwhile. I think in a way how it ended up sort of like has stopped this being a question and the fact that it was in the sprint race. But like it does bring up, the question of whether or not these should be like 10-second penalties or something else, for not giving places back. If teams are going, because we've seen in other races where teams have just eaten them and kept going in circuits where track position is even more important.
The one thing I'd say though is I don't think it's exciting to watch somebody be bottled up behind a draw. You know what I mean? Like there are times where an overtake just can't happen, but it's not like good racing is happening. It is just like the move can't be done.
The 4 seasons before the regulations changed.
Exactly.
All that dirty air. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's what looms really large in my memory is like, yes, years of watching, we'd say, oh, that's a good duel. But really it was just like a guy stuck behind the other, like trying to get in striking range.
Getting their tires shredded. Yeah.
I like a little bit this notion that there is this like higher cost version of the overtake where it's like you couldn't do it cleanly, but maybe it would be better if you just got past this guy.
It's like a mortgage, you just sort of take the debt on at the start and then you're hoping to sort of work it out over time. You know what I mean? Like I'll make up that money. And then I'll be okay. I'll make up that time, and then I'll be all right.
love to just put numbers in the bank rate and just be like, what life is possible for me?
Well, everything was possible for Max Verstappen, and he won the sprint.
He did.
Earning himself 8 points. Lewis Hamilton second. Charles Leclerc third. Lando Norris fourth. Sergio Perez fifth. Ahead of Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly, George Russell, the final points paying position in 8th. Alex Albon just outside the points in 9th, followed by Piastri, Ocon, Ricciardo, Alonso, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg in 15th, Bottas, Zhou, Magnussen, Sargent, and then the DNF of Stroll, who retired with no brakes.
Yeah, 2 laps before the end, I think it was. It was pretty late. For a sprint as well. I guess also if they're at it, I think he was in 11th maybe when he retired. So they're gonna, we got another race this weekend. Let's fix it.
He did. His radio did sound like, I gotta retire. Why? The brakes.
Just not feeling it.
Yeah, it's the brakes.
Yeah, sure. It's the brakes.
The vibes suck down there now. It's just it's
oh my god,
bad.
Totally. Do you remember at the start of the season when they were like they were the closest thing to
top of the world?
I know what's happening.
Alonso's going to be bringing the fight to the front of the grid. It's going to be he's back, baby, and it's just not.
No, get the deck chairs out now again.
Yeah, it's an alarming signal on a couple levels, right? Because it's like there's the test of whether a team can design a good car for the start of the year, and then the second phase is like, can you develop it? And they seem to have just completely whiffed that ladder.
In baby steps, right?
Pardon?
First baby steps. The first season, you design, you figure out how to design a good car, and the next, maybe you figure out how to update it.
I wonder if it was a case of like, if it ain't broke, right? Because they had nothing to like the conservative approach of like, if you've got the lead car in this sort of like top of the mid pack, and everyone else was like doing dog shit. They all were like trying to like throwing everything at the wall to try and fix their cars, and maybe I don't know, maybe they just got caught napping because they had a decent car and they didn't want to mess with it too much.
Well, and also the black box for all of us is how much budget is being allocated toward future development by some of these teams. Like how many, like it's a funny thing that could be happening because I think you see evidence of it. Like notice how unhappy Max seems with the car of late. It just bears all the hallmarks of like championships wrapped. This car is not getting better. We might like it's there's evidence that like some teams, you sort of stand pat and you start thinking about next year. Even some teams that are currently advancing up the ladder are like McLaren coming out of this weekend saying like we're done with upgrades. I do kind of wonder if for a team in Aston Martin position, does it make sense to be like, hey, we started strong, great, let's bag those points and then coast and allocate budget.
But they're trying,
toward,
right?
Yeah.
Like they're bringing floor upgrades that aren't
That's
working.
the problem. Their upgrades seem to suck, and that is and Drew, like I get you, it's like baby steps, but didn't Force India kind of have similar? Well, Force India had problems. They would fade over the course of a year because like their chairman was on the run. But
all the funds are getting allocated to private jets to fly him to another tax haven.
hiding with his sim rig in safe houses around the globe. But no, I think it does feel like kind of Force India Racing Point. I'm not sure we're the most successful like continuing to bring the heat over the course of the year.
Yeah.
And that seems to have maintained. But either way, it just seems like nobody's having
Stroll
fun
bucks
there.
now.
Daddy Stroll bucks. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see. Next year is going to be interesting for a lot of reasons. But before that, we've got the race, the United States Grand Prix, the race. On pole, Charles Leclerc. Second, Lando Norris. Third, Lewis Hamilton. Fourth, Carlos Sainz. Fifth, George Russell. Sixth place, Max Verstappen, who qualified on pole but had his time deleted for track limits.
Yep. That penultimate
and
corner.
I believe it was that his other time, the time that he ended up, being stuck with, was compromised by his teammate being in the way.
Oh, that's
starting
funny.
his own flying lap.
He should be an IndyCar. You don't have to take that turn at all. You can just they arc it. It's
YOLO it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, they literally take it like one big wide turn, that whole section in IndyCar. It's wild. They can't do it in F1 because it's too dangerous.
Also, IndyCar last time they raced there didn't enforce the track limits. Which was hysterically funny. That's what it was. That was the worst example of it. Was that turn? Yeah. It was hilarious. Yeah,
like Trackmania out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Pierre Gasly will start 7th, Esteban Ocon 8th, Sergio Perez 9th, and Oscar Piastri 10th. Behind them, we've got Tsunoda, Zhou, Bottas, Ricardo, Albon in 15th, Sargent 16th, and then Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Alonso, and Stroll all starting from the pit lane after their cars were modified whilst under Parc Fermé conditions. So, some of those guys in the back moving up some spots. Danny, do you want to take us through the start?
Sure. There's a lot to talk about here. This might be the most detailed part of the entire race. So, to your point earlier about the inside line, I think probably the best example of this is what actually happens behind the 2 leaders, rather than what happens at the back. But Norris does get a good start. So he's starting from second, Leclerc is starting in first on the outside. Leclerc does have the second phase of the start is particularly poor for him. And as a result, instead of he kind of can't defend inside at this stage, so he just tries to take the other line, like a wider line. There's like 3 or 4 different lines from the top of this chicane at the top of the hill. It doesn't work out. Norris gets great grip up the inside, and he also is sort of helped by this emerging battle that's happening between Hamilton and Sainz. Hamilton and Sainz's battle is very interesting because Sainz is starting in 4th. Hamilton is in 3rd. Hamilton gets slowed by Leclerc in that second phase. So he ends up slowing down and losing a bit to Sainz because of just Leclerc isn't going as fast as he thought he would. So he has to like duck up the inside. While he's done that, Sainz has already gotten up the inside, and they're basically like toe to toe entering the chicane. As Sainz squeezes up the inside because he has his nose in front, Hamilton gets really just awkwardly shuffled into the oncoming Leclerc, and it's sort of a minor miracle that they don't have a bit of a Ferrari sandwich there at the top of the hill. While that happens, the two Alpines have gotten themselves in a scuffle. I think there was like a couple of places between Gasly and Ocon, but as they get through there, they end up getting sort of squished at the chicane, and Piastri dives down the inside of Ocon. As they all shuffle back together, Russell's in that pack too. Gasly ends up losing out really badly. He tumbles down. I think Russell gets past him, and so does Perez eventually. But ahead of him, you have Piastri and Ocon. And Ocon, I swear to God, this could have gone so... There was a bunch of very near catastrophic accidents in this one. Piastri going around the outside of turn 2, which is a fairly incidental corner. I don't think we've ever had a crash there. He gets on the rumble strips and loses the back of the car very slightly, corrects it, and ends up like using Ocon as like a safety barrier to like sort of get back on track, which ends up sort of tweaking out Ocon as well, and then Piastri ends up getting ahead of him. So a great start for Piastri, who's up into 6th at this stage. Norris has already got the jump on Leclerc, and Sainz has also got the jump on Hamilton. Not a great start for Gasly, but yeah, that's how they all shuffled out. But it was pretty wild. Like most of that, I didn't see the first time I watched the race. It was when I watched the highlights afterwards. I got to enjoy what was going on in the back.
Yeah, Piastri also had a great start, jumping 4 places to 6th, while Russell fell 3 places to 8th. And by lap 3, we've got a DRS train behind Russell, who has gotten ahead of Gasly with a bit of trickery, being behind the DRS line and then overtaking and then activating DRS while already ahead.
Cheeky.
Great move. Perez then follows him into 9th place. Lap 4, Hamilton retakes 3rd place as which he lost to Sainz in the opening laps, using DRS on the back straight. And Verstappen is once again putting on an overtaking clinic. Starting 6th, he passes Sainz at the end of the back straight for 4th, with a lot of race yet to go. And this basically turns into a tire strategy race. Are people going to go for the 1 stop here, or do you commit to the 2 stop? Or do you fumble your 1 stop and switch to 2 stop and maybe don't do so hot? Hamilton, however, is also ascendant, getting by Leclerc in the same place at the back of the back straight. For 2nd place, that car looking fast without Verstappen around to compare it to. Lap 7, Ocon retires after getting his side pod crunched by Piastri.
Yep.
And then Piastri retires soon after. Ocon, the most retirements of anyone this year.
It's a shame. It ended up catching out both of them in the end.
Yeah.
I think Ocon, you could tell, was kind of, his steering wheel was like 20% wrong for a lot of the race. You're like, all right, is he going to keep it up? But yeah, I think it was a bit of a nightmare for him. A shame though, yeah. And it was Piastri's fault. It wasn't anything Ocon had done. And yeah, shame considering the start that Piastri had. I think by the time he retired though, he had like dropped down to like 10th or 11th or something.
Yeah. So lap 11, back to the Verstappen show. He attacks Leclerc at the end of the back straight. Leclerc defends, going off track, allowing him to fight at the next few corners, but eventually Verstappen does seal the deal for 3rd place. And then the pit stops happen. So strategy time, lap 17, Verstappen pits, hoping to goad Hamilton and Norris ahead into pit stops. Otherwise, they would be vulnerable to the undercut. Hamilton, though, goes long, presumably going for a 1 stop. He pits on lap 21, but when he exits the pits, Verstappen is there and cruises by. Lap 28 is when Verstappen catches Norris, drives up the inside at the end of the back straight. Norris tries a little defense, but it is not enough, and Verstappen assumes the lead. So McLaren's strategy was to one stop, as evidenced by Norris going from mediums to hards at his first stop, which meant that Verstappen would have had to pull out a 20-second lead over him to be able to pit and still come out ahead. But McLaren apparently realized that this wasn't going to work, and on lap 35, Norris comes in for new hard tires, his second stop.
Yeah, which ultimately also decides. Like, I think everyone was fighting for second here, and that sort of feels like it decides who's going to come in second rather than who's going to come in first. It felt like Red Bull's sort of insane pace over everyone that they had, and especially the tire wear issue as well that they had earlier in the season, has definitely been quelled a bit. And the Mercedes in particular looked really good with their new upgrades they brought to this race. Talk about a little bit more about that later. But yeah, it seemed like that was what was going on there. I think that Hamilton was probably going to get the jump on him before the end of this race.
I just find it really gratifying that so I stream a lot of Motorsport Manager or streamed a lot of Motorsport Manager over at Waypoint in those days. And I consistently, like, the delusion I will talk myself into at any given race is like, this could be a one-stopper. And it's because it's so tempting. Because, like, how else are you going to be like, imagine if you just didn't stop.
Yeah.
You could pick up, like, there's 30 seconds on the table. Like, who couldn't use 30 seconds, you'll win. And the problem is if you get that wrong, like, you'll pay, like, way more than 30 seconds in lost pace. And it was really gratifying to see, like, Mercedes being like, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could pull this off.
Yeah.
Leclerc didn't even let him off the strategy. Right? Like, I mean, like, Mercedes aborted. But Leclerc was one of those classic, like, you just leave the pitcher in too long. There's nothing in the bullpen. You just got to wear it. They just, like, left him to be like, you gotta make this work. And it just didn't. And I think it also does highlight the degree to which, like, not having extended practice time on the weekend.
Yeah.
Everyone is just, like, groping through the dark.
And it can make for an interesting race. It just kind of didn't this time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like strategy,
even for a strategy race, this was a little bit. Okay. There was maybe it's also a factor of where we are in the season, where there's just so, I would have loved for the strategy race to have been between the two Red Bulls, but Sergio Perez has absolutely no desire to be on a podium. So we don't even get that. You know what I mean? So it just seems like we have these mismatches. Like, I don't know. So for whatever reason, I was not compelled by this race either. This is maybe the worst race weekend of the season for me, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's recency bias, but
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I'm not saying this race was better than you're saying. I'm pretty sure there has to have been worse.
Been a worse one?
Year.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, Norris pitting kind of forces Verstappen to protect against the undercut because, he does win, Verstappen, but only by 2.2 seconds. So they do have to stay on their toes here. So Verstappen pits and exits ahead of Norris. Hamilton then, also unable to make the one-stop work, comes in on lap 39, exiting in fourth as Verstappen passes Leclerc, who did, as we said, stick with the one-stop. Verstappen passing him for the lead. Norris then also gets by Leclerc on that lap with his much newer tires, and then Hamilton gets by 4 laps later, getting himself into a podium position. Elsewhere on track, lap 48, Stroll pulls a daring move around the outside of Tsunoda for 10th place, just to check in with our friend Lance Stroll.
Yeah.
And then back to Hamilton on those medium tires, catches up to Norris and attempts to dive up the inside of turn 1, but Norris defends aggressively, Hamilton having to move to the outside, then cuts back, gaining enough ground through the corners to finally seal the deal and earn second place.
Yeah, nice overtake.
For a moment.
Yeah.
Also, Alonso retired with, they said,
apathy.
Dropouts and floor performance. Yeah. Again, not a great except for that flash of a good move around the outside on the Stroll. Not a weekend to forget.
Who doesn't love to hear a guy on Friday be like, it's a test weekend for us? That just gets you fired up.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Don't worry.
So I'll run down the race result here.
Yeah.
As they finished, Max Verstappen in the lead, Lewis Hamilton second,
Asterix.
Lando Norris third, Carlos Sainz fourth, Sergio Perez fifth, Charles Leclerc sixth.
Asterix.
That is not how it is written in the record books. Do we want to talk here? I'll just run down the rest of them.
Go for it.
George Russell. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc disqualified. So everyone else behind them moves up 2 spots, meaning Norris earns second, Sainz earns third, Perez fourth, Russell fifth, Gasly sixth, Stroll is seventh, Tsunoda is eighth, Alex Albon is ninth, and look who's coming up points, Logan Sargent at the American Grand Prix.
Beautiful. You'd love to see it.
Yeah,
First
points.
Home ice advantage.
That's right. For Florida's own, Florida man, Logan Sargent.
It's always a special moment
They won a
when
Stanley
a
Cup
Williams
last year.
driver finally gets points.
It is
Yeah.
special.
It's a good time.
Nico Hulkenberg 11th, Valtteri Bottas 12th, Zhou Guanyu 13th, Kevin Magnussen 14th, and Daniel Ricciardo in 15th and last place because we have the DNFs of Alonso, Piastri, and Ocon. Tsunoda also scored an additional point for setting the fastest lap of the race.
Wow,
Thank you,
really?
Tsunoda.
I did not know that.
And I think he would have been in the top 10 anyway without the disqualifications. But Danny, tell us why.
Yeah, so Leclerc and Hamilton got DQ'd, and I guess this will probably
Nope,
spill
not
out into-
taken for to Dairy Queen for a
No,
special
they
treat
weren't.
after a good race.
Good boy. Enjoy this 7,000 calorie treat. No, this may spill out into a little chat about scrutineering in a second, but let me first read out the FIA bulletin, which goes to explain why both of them were disqualified, just entirely. No fine, no penalty, just DQ'd from the race. The bulletin reads, during the hearing, the teams acknowledged that the measurement performed by the FAA technical team was correct and stated that the high wear on the skid pads was probably a result of the unique combination of the bumpy track and the sprint race schedule that minimized, spelt the European way. I like that. Good job,
Minimized.
FIA. The time to set up and check the car before the race. The stewards note that the onus is on the competitor to ensure that the car is in compliance with the regulations at all times during the event. In this particular case, the rear skid in the area defined in the technical delegate's report was outside of the threshold, which includes a tolerance for wear. Therefore, the standard penalty for breach of a technical regulation is imposed. Breach of a technical regulation. You can't do it, you get disqualified. So let's rewind that a little bit.
The ref makes a T with his hands.
Exactly. You're out. So there are a bunch of rules that the cars have to abide by, some of which you're probably used to seeing or hearing about, some of which are done to all cars, like the weighing of the cars at certain times during the race weekend. Some of them are done sort of ad hoc or to like smaller amounts of the cars because they just can't do detailed scrutineering on every single car for every single regulation. The regulation they're talking here at the moment is in regards to the thickness of the skid plate. So there is a big thing underneath the car. These were brought in as part of the like a long time ago. This is part of the like post Senna crash regulations. In fact, I think it was like the first weekend they introduced this. Schumacher got DQ'd for having the not having too much wear on his skid plate too. But basically means that in regards to the skid plate, that you have to have like a minimum thickness for safety regulations on the skid plate. Obviously, this can get worn away by, bottoming the car out, by hitting bumps, or perhaps in the case of a 2-race weekend, getting a lot of that stuff happening. So first of all, why Leclerc and why Hamilton? So those were 2 of 4 cars that were checked for this particular element of the car. The other two were, I know it was Verstappen, and I can't remember who the other one was. It must have been Norris.
Might have been Norris, yeah.
I think it was. And it's not random. They often do things like check the lead cars for this because of maybe where they are in the championship or whatever. There would have been other elements, other parts, cars checked for other things. They often take one or two cars and check them for absolutely everything as well. But like I said, they have to minimize it because they can't check all the cars all the time, which is also why their teammates, who probably also were in contravene or breaking this rule, were not disqualified. If they checked Russell's car and if they checked Sainz's car, the chances are they probably also would have had this issue, but they didn't check them. And they don't check them when they find someone who's done it. It's just not part of the way they operate the stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not like we got a juicy lead, we got to get to the bottom of the case. So it's not like, even though Mercedes clearly set a car up wrong this weekend, that probably means they set up two cars wrong. That doesn't mean that they're going to be like, all right, George, bring that car around now. Yeah, we got to see what you ran. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and this is just the sort of the compromise that everyone has sort of agreed to, to agree to. The other thing that could have happened is the teams after the sprint race could have decided to check their cars while the cars are in Parc Ferme, but they would have taken a penalty as a result. So if Mercedes, they had brought in, I guess this weekend they had their new floor, right? So they had, was it the floor or was it the side? They had done a bunch of aero work. I think the side pods were different too. So they had a new package. And so they would have been setting it up, with the skid plates and with everything in mind, with all of this stuff in mind. Like, it's super complex, right? But they would have had their car set up in a certain way, hoping that by the end they'd also be able to pass all these regulations. If they had gotten wind of the fact that the car was bottoming out a lot, because obviously the drivers would know from being on the track, they could have opted to taken a look and maybe tried to set up the car different, but they would have had to start from the pit lane. So that's the other way they could have gotten out of it, I guess. But yeah, it's just the way of the rules. There are certain rules that are very black and white in F1. They had them in to talk about it. Everyone sort of agreed what had probably happened. They took the rap on the knuckles, and that's it.
Pretty sharp rap on the knuckles, though.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
The last thing I'll just add here is that this was interesting to me because I literally I couldn't remember the last time somebody failed a skid plank test.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't happen very often, because this is one of those things that, like, it's like getting your tire pressures really, really wrong. It just doesn't happen anymore because it gets ironed out in testing. But this notion that, like, F1 just has to, you would never be able to have enough scrutineers to, like, check the entire field for compliance. So it's just kind of this, like, vibes based, like, let's take a look at that. The other part is, I'd always sort of imagined it as them being like, we're going to dismount the entire skid plank and just, like, measure every bit of it to see, like, see how it's done. But they actually do have, like, a set of prescribed, like, holes drilled in it that are used for testing. So you only have to measure certain, like, sample spots on the plank to tell you whether it's in compliance or not. And it was only one of them, I gather, failed for Hamilton. So it's like it was like, it's literally, the tolerances are tight, right? Like, you can't, like, 1 millimeter of wear. That's not a lot of tolerance. But the plank seems like it was largely in that tolerance, except for one little spot. But you do wonder, setting a car up really, really low tends to make it a little bit faster, and the Mercedes is oddly fast.
Yeah.
Danny, sounds like there's some drivers complaining.
It is, yeah.
Background.
I've got I think Charles Leclerc is in the room next to me. I'm trying to, like, tap my mute button. But yeah, it's very funny. There's some F1 drama happening in my house, I think.
Well, I want to hear more about the scrutineering process, but we will get to it after this break, and we'll be right back. Rob, you flagged an article here from Autosport about scrutineering and how it works. We've never really talked about this. and frankly, I don't know a whole lot about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is like, I mean, Danny covered the big high level parts of it, which is that it is a sort of limited sample of the cars, similar to with Seb's fuel sample that he couldn't return. It's one of those things where if they request it, you can't provide it. These things are sort of instant, like unappealable, issues that crop up. Yeah, and then like the thing about the skid plates at least was like kind of what I was saying a moment ago. Like it mostly covered what I'd marked out, which is just that this is a process where they've got things that are built in to facilitate like measuring the skid plate and getting through that process really, really quickly. So you have things like the samples to make sure that the car is in compliance. The other thing is that teams can. I'm not sure if Dan brought this up, but like no, Danny, you did, because like they would take the penalty if they inspected their own cars over the course of the weekend,
which is wild, right?
It is interesting that Park for May rules is kind of this like double jeopardy kind of thing where it's, if you're checking to see whether you're within the rules, you're out of the rules if you fix it. But yeah, like there's that process of, because the teams like went into this with less data, and I guess maybe it points to an issue with the sprint weekend a little bit as well. Like is something like this entirely? Is it entirely fair in a sport where like usually there's a lot more practice running the teams get to do before, like all these regulations are kind of built with the presumption that you're going to have 3 practice sessions before the car is locked. And here they got 1, right? That's how this kind of unfolds. So it's not like teams might suspect they've got this wrong. Like one of the things that was mentioned about why do they choose to spot check who they spot check is that onboard cameras will kind of reveal, if a skid plate's hitting the ground a lot, you're going to see that reflected in sort of the violence of the driver's head movements during the race. Like there's a lot of things that might cause the FIA to say like this car probably is deserving of special scrutiny. The teams probably also have an inkling that things might be a little bit awry. But you're kind of, it's funny. It doesn't seem like they can even measure it when it's in Park for May. It's like you can't even know. Like they can't go there and be like, are we going to get penalized? Even that, because obviously you would fix it if you found that and just like eat the penalty.
But you could theoretically fix something without busting Park for May, right? I mean, there's not a lot you can do. You can make like wing adjustments, I guess, But
that is an interesting point, because one of the theories about why this might have happened is the wind changed.
Oh, funny!
And so there was a theory that like the cars might have been getting pressed harder than they were during earlier sessions. So that is one thing that they might have been able to do, is like take some wing off it during like the sprint. But yeah, but the sprint, the plank is a tough thing to fix without breaking Park for May fully, because the things that cause that are just fundamental setup things that you can't touch, even if you knew what was up.
Well, we see what happens when teams break the rules. Drivers can also break the rules, Danny, and be fined.
They can. They could be fined €1 million, according to these new FIA rules, which seem somewhat arbitrary. I mean, I guess all fine numbers are arbitrary in some ways. So I guess they were revisiting some old rules. They blew some dust off the rule book and realized that the last time they had, I guess, put a limit on put an upper limit, a ceiling, if you will, on the amount they could fine a driver, it was a measly €250,000. So they quadrupled it. It had been 12 years, so they quadrupled
inflation.
It. Exactly, inflation.
What are you gonna do?
Inflation, and
Supply
also the Andretti stuff and just everything. They just, FAA needs more money. What was it? He needs more money to do data about, what was it again? Something something. I don't know. Somebody over at the FIA has like credit card debt, and we're just figuring out all these reasons why.
Ben Slam, like we can't possibly fix the track limit situation without like tens of millions of dollars.
We need to do research. Research at home. So this is sort of would have been a nothing burger, but they started asking the drivers about this a little bit. And some of the reaction to it is quite funny because the drivers are kind of like somewhat shocked by it, just the idea that they could be fined that much. And also there was a great chat with Alexander Albon on racefans.net, where he sort of shed light on how not many of the drivers on the grid could actually afford that. Like a lot of them aren't paid insanely well. Alex says, I think people wouldn't realize, especially the first 2, 3, 4 years of being a Formula One driver, that the salaries are nothing like what people actually think they are. It would be a tough fine if you were to get into debt for it. Albon pointed out the drivers also have to pay 6-figure sums to the FIA for their super licenses each year, saying, we already pay our super license fees, which are already extremely expensive. I don't know a sport where you have to pay yourself to enter it. I think that in itself seems a bit different to most sports. In the end, if they're going...
I didn't know that you had to pay that much, or that it was that significant.
It's crazy.
I kind of thought like you qualified for a super. Maybe you sent an application with like $50.
It's not exactly the Olympics,
to it,
is it? He also finally says, in the end, if they're going to raise it to $1 million, then they're in some ways targeting 3 or 4 drivers because no one else could actually afford that. Just to give you an idea of like some of the fines we've had over the past years, you might remember. Was it the last race where Albon walked across the track? The FIA
Hamilton?
Sorry, Hamilton. Apologies. Of Albon on the brain. When he walked across the track, they're revisiting that fine, but that was €50,000. Verstappen also got 50,000 that time. He wiggled Hamilton's rear wing. Remember that? Mm-hmm. He wasn't, and he did that. Sebastian Vettel got a €5,000 fine when he rode that scooter back to the to the pit lane. So like, I can't remember anything that was much more than that. So it's in a way I'm like, what could you do that you would get $1 million?
It's got to be Schumacher level breaches, right? That's the only time I can think of. Like, you parked your car at Monaco. You shoved it, like you did what he did to Villeneuve. Like that's the only thing I can think of is where you just have like egregious breaches of,
I guess,
like,
Nelson Piquet Jr., like that type of stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, that gets you kicked out of the league.
That does get you kicked. Yeah, maybe they can also find them. Get a bit of a payday while you're kicking them out. I wonder if, like, I always thought that Vettel should have got. I like Sebastian Vettel, but I always thought he should have gotten in a bit more trouble over that ramming of Hamilton he did in Baku.
Oh, yeah,
that seemed like just road ragey in a way. In a way that was like kind of shocking.
But probably not worth $1 million because it was like kind of low stakes, right? Like it was they
were going slow.
Yeah. So yeah, I think like it is one of those things where it's like, you're just putting that fine on the books to have it there, being like, well, if somebody does something really bad, we can fine them $1 million.
It's like your mom grabbing the wooden spoon and just tapping it in her hand.
Yep.
Anyone else grow up in a Catholic family?
No, but we are growing up with the sprint race, and the sprint race is growing up with us. Rob, it seems like some changes are happening to the sprint race's body.
Who knows? It's growing up, growing old, prematurely, perhaps. People seem like they might be kind of over it.
Really?
After a precocious growth spurt, the sprint race has entered an awkward phase. So, I mean, you heard us talking about it earlier. Like, we were kind of, it seems like collectively we're kind of bored by this race weekend. And certainly the sprint does not seem like it was a particular highlight for any of us. That's matched by some of the data coming in. I forget who it is, but basically the race promoter for the USGP mentioned that Saturday sales were not good. for the sprint race. And remember, the entire justification of the sprint race is that we got to get people in through the gate Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We want 3 big days, at the tracks, and that didn't happen. And it was interesting.
Worth pointing out that if you've never bought tickets for a race before, typically you can buy one or multiple or all 3 days. So you could just, if you wanted just the Saturday ticket, it's cheaper. It's a lot cheaper than race day or certainly all 3 days. But yeah, interesting to see that even then, it's not compelling enough.
And in the interview, because these answers kind of came up and he was being kind of discursive about it as he was describing like what he was seeing from this. He explained that so Bobby Epstein is the guy's name. He explained, people were like, well, could it be because the championship's locked? And he was like, that could be it, but the Grand Prix tickets did fine. It grew. So Sunday, you're seeing the growth curve you want to see with a growing sport like F1. The sprint day was just kind of lagging.
It was lower than the previous year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But in either case, he's like, so if it's the Max effect where people are just like kind of tired of watching Red Bull smoke everyone at these races, you'd think that would have just hit the whole weekend, and Sunday would have been slower too. That didn't happen. So something about the sprint race is a turnoff, and that is kind of like he sort of came away being like, I'm not sure we would want to do the sprint race next year but we'll work with the FIA with F1 on whatever, but like it might not be something we actively pursue for COTA. So this is broadly like it's triggered a broader conversation in F1 of like, how do you fix the sprint race? Because nobody's quite happy with it. Nobody's quite sure what to do. If these numbers aren't going up, if it's not bringing in more revenue, then what's kind of the point?
It's costing a lot of money.
Yeah. And so people are starting to apparently like team principals, leadership within F1, FOM are meeting, and they're sort of opening up to more unorthodox ideas for how do you fix the sprint race? And to me, these begin to sound a little desperate.
Okay, I like it. I like desperate.
What if we put a little money on the line? What about $1 million prize purse for the winner?
Oh my God, I could pay off that fine.
You could pay that fine. You could pay that fine.
Well, hey, I have a better idea. What about an elimination race where if you're the last driver, you get the fine, or I guess not the last, because then you'd be the winner. If you're the first driver out, you get the fine. No, that's stupid. I take it back.
That's just a prize, Danny. That's just maybe if you're the last.
I thought you were saying if you came in last, you pay it. You were fine.
Yeah. But then I guess that's really kicking dirt in the face of teams that already don't have the money to compete.
Yeah, I don't love it, honestly. Though it is an especially it's a very American idea.
It's called capitalism. It's called a late capitalism rule. Yeah.
Then there was so because they won't touch the race grid for the race. What's the sprint doing here? One theory is, what if we did a sprint championship? So now within the F1 calendar, there's your let's be real, the actual F1 championship. But what if we had sprint races which had a different point structure, and like it was who's going to be king of the sprints?
Oh my gosh, this is interesting. Like, I'm a European. I'm used to, my favorite football team playing in 14 different competitions. Make sure that they're in the Cup Winners' Cup and the League Cup and the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup and the Europa League and the Champions League.
Is there actually one called the Cup Winners' Cup?
There used to be. It's not around anymore. But there was a Cup winner. There was a European Championship where all of the domestic Cup winners would play each other in a Cup Winners' Cup.
And what would they win, Danny?
They would win a cup, a bigger cup, the biggest. You wouldn't believe how large this cup was. I remember because Arsenal, my team, famously lost to Real Zaragoza when I was about 11 or 10 years old, because a guy called Naeem chipped David Seaman from the halfway line. And boy, oh boy, did every child I was in school with for the next 3 years remind me of that every single day. So yeah, the Cup Winners' Cup was a good one. But yeah, I'm not you don't tend to have the side pot championship in American sports, right?
No. Well, that's because they're all cartels and they're all engineered so that they are like, they're contractually obligated to stay within a league, but then nobody else can enter the league. So it's all kind of structured to like be, capped in size and it restrict freedom of movement and competition. Don't have that. And listen, like I think the real problem with this idea is that this past year I got into some pro cycling, and I enjoy that.
Nice.
Like, it's cool that you have races within these bigger events.
Yeah.
But cycling has interesting different disciplines in it that, like, everyone's running the same course, but there are meaningful disciplines that are being pursued separately from just like who can go over these courses.
It's kind of like an endurance race.
Yeah.
Endurance motor racing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though just because of the variables of like the courses they're running on, the human body, like way different classes of rider out there, right? Like I don't think you get the spread in endurance racing of the difference between like a sprinter and a general classification rider in cycling. But sprints are just not they're not a meaningfully different discipline in F1. It's a little mini F1 race. At that point,
what if we made it a really mini F1 race? What if we just had them race the go-kart track that's like beside the F1 track? Most of them have them.
I would be way more into that.
I'd be so into it.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
So there's some other ideas to kicking around. What if we did reverse grids?
Yes.
What if we did, now how do you call it, like reverse grids can be tricky to set up and everything, but we could do reverse championship grids. So now whoever is, and now you're starting to catch my interest. Because now it's like, we're putting Haas, Williams, AlphaTauri.
Logan Sargent on pole.
Oh my
every
gosh.
week.
Yeah, and like let's just see what happens. And also
turn that frown upside down, Lance Stroll.
And also it would get like some of these guys, let's like bad things happen to mid-pack drivers. It's messier back there. It's like, you're up at the front. Yeah, there's high stakes like fights for the first corner, but there's only so many cars around you. But boy, if you're toward the tail end of the traffic jam heading in the corner, I kind of like the reverse grid idea. But then they start to lose me as they're talking, like some of the things that are on the table is, well, if we do reverse grids, we obviously still need to do qualifying. So we got to have a qualifying format.
So that means you drive as slow as you can. You got to creep around the course. You got last.
Yeah, so like they still want a qualifying format that will be meaningful for this like secondary race they're doing.
One shot.
And to me, it just kind of highlights the sprint race. I don't know. F1 kind of feels like it's nowhere with it. Like they haven't figured out it's kind of twofold.
You know what sorry, you go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say it's like they haven't figured out how to make it reliably interesting because F1 itself is not reliably interesting. Like that's just that it's just you got a microcosm of the problem happening, and then you haven't figured out how to give it any sort of meaningful stakes that are interesting to the drivers.
So, and I think this is why you need Vince McMahon in here, right? Because the problem here is that they're trying to fix a carny problem, which is that they're trying to get people in the door. But the problem is that Formula One and FIA don't have enough, like, they have too much shame. They have too much, like, we need this to, like, look proper, right? We're doing this entirely to get people through the door. It is a money-making fiasco, but we don't want anyone to think that it's that. So we're going to give it this feeling of authenticity and an import when literally
on pure merit,
100% in a way that is the ideas are conflicting, and the problem is you need someone to come in there and just go, guys, the Grand Prix is on a Sunday, okay? No one's taking your Grand Prix away. The sponsors will still be there. F1's the best sport in the world. but Saturday's freak show day. Okay, Saturday we're going to introduce some really fucked up stuff that none of you are going to want to tell your partners about. You're not going to be proud about it, but it's going to get people through the
morning
the
after
door.
Zoolander scene, basically. Yeah.
That's what they need to do. They need to like just get rid of whatever, self-respect they have left and just embrace it. And just
It's just like we are sorry, like Saturdays for the Blue Show. Like that
Yes,
is what
100%.
That is what we are doing here.
Bernie's sprinkler truck is pulling up, guys.
Just about to say.
Yeah. Like
Listen, F1 needs to do better with sustainability. Absolutely.
so
But
we're gonna,
dumping a few thousand gallons of water on various racetracks could be cool.
you know what's really sustainable? Mascot foot races.
Jesus.
Right? How about everyone in the stands gets a tomato? There's so many, that's not very sustainable. Okay, that may be a bit much, but like if they want to do it, they should do it, or I don't know, this is maybe getting a little bit silly. If everyone doesn't want to do it, they should set up some other thing that can do it, or you know what I mean, and let the drivers, let like all of these reserve drivers be involved, or like just figure out a whole other, like, I don't know,
RV construction derby.
Yeah, I'm trying to think
derby.
like how they. I guess it's maybe that's too. Maybe they're not ready for that yet. Maybe my ideas are so bold that in
You're Marty
30
McFly
years,
up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
they're not ready for what I've got.
Just too darn loud.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny though, because like the Qatar sprint was the best part of the weekend, so it's hard to write it off entirely.
No, it's just, F1 doesn't like a format doesn't make an F1 race good, right? You're kind of this luck of the draw type situation.
Yeah, that's true.
Is this one gonna work? And yeah, it's a tricky problem. But I think it's just they have painted themselves into a corner here because they're like it's gonna be interesting, it's gonna be a good show, and it really tends to reproduce the variables of regular F1 racing, but with lower stakes. And so it can feel really flat, and I think it does make these weekends. There are times I'm like, hey, cool, I like getting more race sessions, but on a weekend like this one, I was like, I'm not sure I needed to see two of these.
There was a lot of sport on this weekend as well, which I think didn't help it.
Yeah.
Well, Danny, more sport is happening this weekend.
There is, and it's
Tell
happening.
us about it.
It's happening high in the sky in beautiful Mexico City. We're heading over to Circuit Hermanos Rodriguez, which has been part of the F1 calendar again since about 2015. Since exactly 2015. This track was built in 62. Its first race as part of the F1 calendar was in 63. Interesting part about the history of this. Apparently, Ricardo and Pedro Rodriguez, the Hermanos Rodriguez, if you will, their dad was like an advisor to the president and basically convinced him to make this track. Because he was like, yo, I got these two boys and they were ripping it up. And we need to make it cool. We got this baseball stadium. we got some roads around there. We can adapt it and turn it into a track.
Does that feel like good governance?
No, it's like it's sort of like nepotism.
Does it feel like fun
Is it
governance?
good when your country is doing? Yes, exactly. It does.
So they built 4.3 kilometers or 2.7 miles of track. It has changed a bit since it was originally built. I guess the biggest change is the Peralta corner, which used to be this super wide. It was a great overtake by Mansell there, very famous. It used to be this sort of like wide corner, almost like a bowl kind of section, which now has been sort of bisected, coming out of the stadium section that they have here. The Foro Sol baseball stadium, which is definitely a unique, in the world of F1. I think maybe I've seen another racing series is where they've gone into like an area like that, but certainly for F1, it's
They
wild.
had it in Burnout Paradise.
They did, you're right. It's a funny track because it's kind of a high downforce setup because of the altitude. So it's 2 kilometers up, and that obviously has issues with not just the air as it works aerodynamically, but also in terms of how the engines are operating with the air coming in there. So the teams do have to be a little bit tricky, a little bit smart about how they set up their cars. In terms of overtaking, there's 2 DRS straights, and they kind of constitute the main 2 areas where you're going to see a lot of the overtaking. The start-finish straight is like pretty long here. It's got a DRS zone, which is pretty long too. So down into turn 1, you tend to get a decent amount of overtaking. It's not a particularly sharp turn, it's a bit wide on the outside of it. And then the other one is into turn 4, which is at the other DRS straight.
Is there a third one here on this map?
Oh, sorry, you're right. There is a short one on the way into the stadium section, but you tend not to get... Actually, I take that back. We did see a little bit of overtaking here. It was either last year or the year before into turn
I seem to recall
12.
Magnussen being involved.
Yeah, because we used to not, but we did. I think it was something to do with the new regs, maybe. So no, you're right. There was a... I forgot about that. So the DRS detection zone for the second... for the first 2 DRS zones happens at the... as they exit the stadium, so it's one detection point for the 2 of them. Yeah, it's a interesting track. We've heard from people in the past who've emailed in that it seems to be a pretty fantastic track to attend. Like you can just kind of take the subway there, and they get you in and out fast. And unsurprisingly, I mean, Mexican sports fans are sort of known around the world for being some of the best, most gregarious and joyful in the world. There was a great World Cup there before I was born, I think. The vibes here always seem to be pretty good. It's definitely one that I've sort of flirted with going to. I'm just not sure if I like the track as much. I kind of mostly want to go just to enjoy it,
Yeah, I mean, when you go, do you really get to enjoy the race?
It's a good point.
Like,
yeah,
it's kind of secondary.
It is. You're right. Yeah, that's fair. Especially if you're going to like a different country's one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like even in Austin.
To sit in that baseball stadium, that'd be cool. I'm with you, Danny.
That'd be cool. Yeah, and you'd just be like, man, the food would be great, the beer would be great, the vibes would be great.
You know what I hope they bring back this year?
What?
The horn version of the F1 theme.
Yeah.
Oh, did they do
that
that
was
last year?
so sick. It's like it's so much better than the usual version. Where they
on the
have,
TV
like,
broadcast?
Yeah, they did one with like iconic like Mexican horn. That sort of style of play.
I like that a lot. When is I guess Dia de los Muertos is on? That's the end of the month, though, right? Same as So this would have because that's on like Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. This would have been a good week to go to that. That would have been a blast.
Yeah,
I got to do that next year. That's fun.
It's gonna be nice too. 75 degrees on qualifying day and race day. Maybe a little warmer. That's about 23, 24 Celsius.
Ooh.
Low chance of precipitation, 5% on qualifying day. Climbs a little bit to 10% on race day. And wind, not too much, 7 or 8 miles an hour, or 10 or 11 kilometers an hour out of the north. But heading into the weekend, the driver standings look like this. Max Verstappen, of course, on top with 466 points. Sergio Perez, his teammate, in second with 240. Lewis Hamilton in third with 201. Fernando Alonso is in fourth place with 183 points. Boy, they really did have a strong start. Carlos Sainz is in fifth with 171. Lando Norris in sixth with 159. Charles Leclerc in seventh with 151. Boy, there's a lot of things that can happen before the end of the year here.
Yeah.
George Russell in eighth with 143. Then a jump down to Oscar Piastri in ninth with 83. Pierre Gasly's in 10th with 56. Lance Stroll has 53. Esteban Ocon has 44. Alex Albon now has 25 points in 13th place. Bottas has 10. Hulkenberg in 15th with 9. Tsunoda has 8. Zhou has 6. Magnussen has 3. Lawson has 2. Logan Sargent in 20th place with 1 point. Woo. And Nick DeVries and Daniel Ricciardo have 0. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is, of course, on top with 706 points. More than double of Mercedes is 344. Ferrari is in third with 322. McLaren is in fourth with 242. Aston Martin is in fifth with 236. Did that just happen? Did McLaren just jump Aston Martin?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mayhaps.
Yeah.
Alpine is in sixth with a cool 100 points. Williams in 7th place with 26. Alfa Romeo is in 8th with 16. Gene Haas and team are in 9th with 12. And Alpha Tauri has 10. If you would like to join the standings yourself, you can do so in our fantasy league using the link in the show notes. Here are the top 3, the podium, rather, from the United States Grand Prix, because there are 4 here tied. Two people tied for 3rd place. I has no idea. And Justin's box. In 2nd place, kicking Haas and taking names. And in 1st place, Alt F1 forever.
Beautiful. I like it.
Nice.
Yeah.
But overall, the standings look like this. In 3rd place, I has no idea. In 2nd place, paying the Stroll toll. And in 1st, Horner to the max. You can send us an email if you like, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. We're also all around the socials. You can check it out in the links in the show notes. And that's us around the internet. Do you want to take us around the world, Danny?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
The World Rally Championship is in Paso, Germany for the Central Europe Rally.
El Paso, Germany. Wow.
El Paso, Germany. Best Mexican food you can find. MotoGP is in Thailand at the Chang International Circuit.
Ooh.
The World Superbike Championship is in Jerez in Spain. NASCAR Xfinity Series is in Martinsville Speedway in Martinsville, Virginia for the Dead On Tools 250.
Dead on tools. Those tools are dead on.
They are. As is Super Formula. They are at Suzuka in Suzukashi, Mie Prefecture, Japan. We've got the Repco Supercars at the Surfers Paradise Street Circuit.
Wow.
In Surfers Paradise, Australia.
Well,
is it? Or do you think it's named like Greenland?
Like it's not Surfers Paradise?
It's
It's probably like
surfers down there.
It's
right.
Yeah. It's actually like it's just the shark lobby named it that. It's like full of sharks down there. Either that or it's like where they're like digital city where all like the e-commerce webs companies are. They call it Web Surfers Paradise.
We also got NASCAR.
El Paso, Germany.
Yep. The dusty streets of El Paso. Martinsville, Virginia. Just like the Xfinity. Which, confusingly, the Cup Series race is called the Xfinity 500.
That's confusing.
That is confusing.
Sort it out, Martin.
Get the mayor down here. Also, Formula One this weekend. Maybe you've heard of it. Things kick off Friday, October 27th. Free Practice 1 is at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2.
Nice.
Very watchable times
Yes.
again. Free Practice 2 is 6 p.m. on ESPN2. Saturday, October 28th. Free Practice 3 is at 1:30 p.m. on ESPN News, followed by Qualifying at 5 p.m., also ESPN News. And the race, everyone, Sunday, October 29th at 4 p.m. on ABC. Get those rabbit ears ready. And that's what's going on this weekend. But what happened today, Danny?
Today
in history.
In history, in the past, maybe in the future. No, this is all past stuff today. Graham Hill, Jim Clark, and John Surtees were...
all died.
Nope, they're all good.
John Surtees died much later. So
later.
He rules it out.
Graham Hill definitely still around. We're in with a shout of we're in with a shout of the title going into the season deciding Mexican Grand Prix on this day in 1964. That's crazy. Is it the first year?
What's synchronicity?
63 was the first year. That's cool. Even in the closing stages of the race, Clark looked likely to win his second title until his Lotus engine seized up with just one lap remaining. Surtees finished second and took the world championship. He became the first and so far only motorcycling world championship to win a title on four wheels as well, which is pretty badass. I mean, that's Those are like
really is.
almost entirely different things. Like,
I mean, people were talking about Rossi getting in an F1 car.
do it.
The other Rossi,
The Doctor.
the doctor.
I'd love to see it. You know.
Yes.
The whole F1 paddock was astonished today in 1997 when the qualifying session for the showdown title decider at Jerez produced a bizarre result. Does anyone remember this? This is my favorite qualifying ever. Title protagonists Jacques Villeneuve and Michael Schumacher, plus Heinz Harald Frentzen, set individual fast times to a margin of 1,000th of a second. It has never happened before or since. If I remember...
Wait.
Yes.
3 people tied?
They tied, all 3 of them. And if I remember correctly, the order was in the order in which they finished their laps.
Wow.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
First, second, and
Because
third.
the metering doesn't go down to the...
It doesn't
past
go
the
down
pilot.
anymore.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So if you set yours first, that's who...
I believe... I'm 99% sure that's what happened, that it just went to whoever did it first, which I think was Schumi. I can't remember. But yes, all 3 of them were, or it might have been Villeneuve. All 3 of them
Heinz
were...
Harald Frentzen, that's a name I forget. That I haven't thought about in ages, yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Like
That is crazy.
You're you're immediately thinking, is that the clock broken? Like, what's going on there, guys? Is there a slight bias that's happening on the chip there? But apparently no. They checked it and everything, and seemingly it was all fine. And just
It'd be great if maybe it's on YouTube, the announcer call.
I've seen it before. I've seen that. It's Murray Walker, I think. I've seen that that highlight before. It's definitely on YouTube.
Okay.
We should look it up. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, final thoughts, Danny, ahead of the Mexican Grand Prix.
I'm starting to like the book I'm reading here. This Formula One on this day book is like I'm on the last chapter. It feels like it's disappearing. The nights are getting dark early. Like it's starting to feel like the F1 season's just about wrapping up. And I mean, we've
We
only
got 4 left.
There's only 4 races left. We're here. We're in Brazil. We're in Las Vegas, and then we're off to Abu Dhabi for the sunset, and that's it. So. Yeah, I'm just gonna try and enjoy them as much as I can. There's not really much left to race for, all things considered. But yeah, I'm gonna enjoy the rest of it because God knows I miss it when it's done.
Yeah. Final thoughts, Rob.
2 things. Actually, just a full mariachi version of the F1 theme. All I remembered was the horn. I didn't want to be like, well, of course it's mariachi. It's because, Mexico. But no, I'd forgotten. It's just a beautiful mariachi band rendition of the F1 theme. 2, I think I figured out how to fix sprints.
Okay.
All right, $1 million prize purse.
Okay.
Manufacturers can pay F1 to make the teams. They will prepare and provide all the drivers a street legal, like race equipped car for them to race on the track.
Oh my God.
Like basically,
I like
it'll be
that.
Days of Thunder rental race every weekend.
Yes.
So,
Oh my
If-
God.
if for instance, like
Rob has accepted a puppy once again.
we gotta race like Honda Civics this weekend.
off camera.
By God,
Oh my
we're racing
God.
Honda Civics.
Oh my God. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's like Gran Turismo rules.
Yeah, like, hey, guess what? Today's sprint race entrant
Hot
was
hatches.
provided to us by our friends at Toyota. You're driving Siennas.
I want the Wrangler race.
But imagine that, like, the teams would never go for it because they would be concerned about injury, even though I think the speeds would probably be generally lower enough. And with the,
Right.
it's I don't think sports car racing is any more dangerous than F1 with the proper equipment. And the speeds would be lower with these. But they would just never go for it because I think they'd be worried about injury. But I would kill.
It was
To see
that would
these-
be amazing.
And like,
Yeah.
just like, hey, guess what? We found a bunch of old like Pontiac Grand Prix, and we tuned them up, fixed them up. We're gonna let you go racing.
It'd be
I would
so
love
cool. Could you imagine? I'd love the I guess the only issue I could, like, genuinely, that's a really good idea. And you could have like sponsored ones, like you could have Mercedes sponsor one, like Mercedes the company, or like
Right.
Ford, or any
They
number
pay
of car
to get
companies.
these things as pace cars.
Yeah, exactly. Like any number of companies that have no desire to actually like submit a Formula One team or build an engine. The only issue I can think of is, well, there's lots probably, but the main one I can think of is like the engineers in the pit crews would probably have. It's not exactly their core competency, and it might be so much fun that they end up spending too much time on the Saturday race. And
you could also theme it to where you are. Like if you're in Germany, everyone races Travies,
or like in Japan, 86s.
There you go.
This is what I'm saying. And also, no, the teams wouldn't prepare the race cars. It would be like the manufacturer provides these things. These things roll out of the trailers, set up for racing. And like the pit crews never touch them. And then you get it's a spec series, so fans would love it because it's like equal hardware.
Totally
awesome.
I want to see 20 Fiat 500s drive around Monza.
But it would be a total joke, so the drivers wouldn't take it too seriously and get weird about what does it mean that Lewis beat Max in like a Ford Explorer or something. It wouldn't signify anything. I think, listen, you'll be getting paid on every level. The manufacturers are giving up money.
God.
The fans are pouring in to see it. I think
such a good time.
Can't miss idea.
I don't want the Las Vegas Grand Prix is too expensive for me, but if they had a RAV4 race on Saturday, I'd be there, man.
Oh yeah, It's like, guys, we're going.
That whining noise signals the end of our podcast. If you would like to, how about a Irish Grand Prix and everyone drives DeLoreans?
Oh my God, you're right. That'd be amazing. It'd have to be in the north.
DeLorean filled with cocaine.
Yes,
exactly.
Actually, that's
homologation. That's If you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone, and dogs. We will see you all next week.
Woof, 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 woof.